Great to have Dustin Lutomsky back with us. And Dustin's, one of our, treasured local musicians. And it's great to hear that Dustin has started working now through Jazz Aspen with the high school here in, the school, middle and high school here in Aspen, and also in Basalt as well. So thank you for all you give to the Valley and things like that, Dustin. Great to have you with us. Thank you. And we're going to let our kids go now. So if you want to go downstairs with, I think some have already gone downstairs, got bored of me instantly. And so if anyone wants to go downstairs with Noe and Marixa, that's fantastic. So what we're going to do, while we're in Advent, when the kids are lighting the candles, we might start with the kids up here. And then they'll go down afterwards and hear a little bit of music. During Advent, during this time, I'm going to use the lectionary, which the lectionary is the readings that all the churches, funnily enough, both Protestant and Catholic churches and Methodists, those who choose to do so, have a set lot of readings, and they use the same readings. We don't do that here normally. I sort of make it up. But it is times like Christmas and also Easter, it's quite interesting to follow the lectionary readings because they give us a way of looking and talking about things that are, they're particular readings during these times because there are special times. And this first reading, which is the reading set for today, is a reading about the second coming. Which in Easter, in Advent, we're looking towards the second coming. And this is a reading from Matthew, and it's all about the idea of the sudden coming, the second coming, the coming of salvation. It's Matthew 24, 36 to 44. But about that day and hour, no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. For as the days of Moses were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away, so too will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then 2 will be in a field, and 1 will be taken, and 1 will be left. Keep awake, therefore, for you don't know on what day your Lord is coming. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not let his house be broken into. Therefore, you must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you don't expect. Now, the idea of the second coming was always a big deal, particularly in the Middle Ages, particularly in the sort of early times, because life expectancy was incredibly short. And it was pretty tough as well. I mean, everyone got ill. Got injured, there were, wars all the time, there was no law. And so you were always thinking about death, when it was going to come and what was going to happen. And the idea was, it wasn't just a possibility, it was a definite, you're either going to go to heaven or to hell. And nowadays we think, it's not the case, obviously, it doesn't exist. And it doesn't, But in the old days, in the Middle Ages, it was absolutely real. And not only was it real, but, if you didn't agree with it, you got burnt at the stake. You got killed. There was absolutely a huge reason to believe it as well. So you're never going to, sort of challenge it. And so people realized, when they died, that they were either going to go to heaven or hell, so they're pretty much fixed on that. And so the idea of the end of the world was a fairly attractive proposition because it meant that all bets were off. It's like all rules were gone. And if you read the description of the end of the world in Revelation, now I have to say, yeah, I don't believe in hell. I don't believe in heaven in tradition. I mean, I don't think all those, and that's a slightly separate conversation, but, I don't sort of go with all that sort of thing. And the second coming, from their perspective, if you look at Revelation, it's, do you know that, that hymn, "Lo, he comes in clouds descending." Anyone know that hymn? The idea of the second coming was that Jesus would come down to earth, probably on a cloud, and there'd be a massive, decision-making and judgment about who would be, it's like the ultimate Santa Claus, who is good, and, he's got a list and he's checking it more than twice, who's naughty and who's nice. And those who were naughty ended up in eternal damnation. Those who were nice. And so this was an incredibly real idea. And they thought that this was absolutely going to happen. And, we think, you see signs with the end is nigh now, but in the old days, particularly, they always thought the end of the world was literally just around the corner. Because, if you read bits in the New Testament, it says, some of you here will not die before, the Lord comes. So there's this huge expectation that the Lord will come. And, when you read Revelation, it talks about 1,000 years of Jesus reigning on earth. And this was all taken literally as being, as we now call it, it's gospel. And that's what they thought was the case. But nowadays, that's not the case. What are we looking at when we talk about the second coming? Because, I don't believe that Jesus is going to descend in clouds and come and, that whole stuff. But actually, we are living in a reality here. And in that reality, there are going to be aspects of that reality that do enable us to come to some sort of a conclusion in our life, in the nature of reality. And, my perspective, and I'm going to give you my idea of how the end of, how the end of the world is going to go. But my perspective around it is about the nature of consciousness. And, as we've been talking about, consciousness has been evolving over the last 14 billion years. And if you take the fact, and it's pretty much, scientifically accepted that the foundation of the Big Bang, at the foundation of the Big Bang, there was an awareness or consciousness within that. And that the whole of evolution has been the evolution of consciousness. And that consciousness has gradually evolved, from rocks to single-cell organisms to more complicated organisms, and that consciousness has developed and developed and developed. And we are now the universe made totally conscious of itself. We are able to self-reflect. We can self-reflect as to where we came from. We can self-reflect as to what our place is in the nature of consciousness. So there is, just as the first single-cell organisms were sort of conscious of, maybe a bit of light or whatever was going on, we have now developed in that consciousness. And as that consciousness develops, it will come to a point, and for me, the end of the world or whatever it is, comes to the point where all of creation becomes conscious of itself within the paradigm of a greater consciousness. Now, when that happens, there's a huge aha moment where everybody goes, ah. And there's an understanding of the nature of reality. And something clicks at that particular point. And I don't know what happens at that moment, but for me, that is what we're moving towards. That's my experience of what the second coming will be about. It'll be about where we are all totally conscious of ourselves within a greater reality and as of being one reality. And that, obviously is part of the subject of unity of consciousness. That's bound up in this idea of the nature of reality developing in this particular way and consciousness developing. And therefore, for me, the whole concept of the development of unity of consciousness is a key part of the development of all consciousness. And we've gradually seen human consciousness develop in different ways. The consciousness, that laws were important, of societal consciousness. More recently we've had, a concept of racial consciousness, gender consciousness, global consciousness, where we become aware of ourselves as individuals within that greater consciousness. And it's becoming part of the way that we think about life. Scientists are talking about the nature of unity of consciousness. Now, has anybody seen Pluribus? No. You've seen Pluribus. Who's seen Pluribus? Yes, Dan Sheridan. I'd like to recommend, there are two shows that I'd like to recommend. It was quite interesting, that first, in that thing, it says, one will be left and the other will be working in the field. There's the idea of the rapture. The idea. For those of you, this is in parentheses, there's a great series about the rapture called The Leftovers. And it's The Leftovers is on HBO. And it's about the idea that the rapture's happened and 2/3 or a third of the world has disappeared. And the rest is just us. We're the ones that are left behind. We're the left behind. So I recommend that if you're interested in the whole concept. But Pluribus is a different kettle of fish. Pluribus is on Apple Plus. And the actual concept of Pluribus is the most miserable person on earth must save the world from happiness. The most miserable person on earth must save the world from happiness. Now, the actual word pluribus is a Latin word, and it means from many or of many, and it's most famous for being part of the phrase e pluribus union, out of many one, which is the unofficial motto of the United States. That's where it comes from. But the idea of pluribus is amazing. The basic start of it is that, for various reasons, and if you watch it, you'll see, there's a stream of a code of an enzyme that scientists discover from space, and they decide to make this enzyme. And they make this enzyme in a lab, and someone gets bitten by a rat that has the enzyme in it. And gradually what happens is that everyone that actually has this enzyme in them joins in consciousness with the other person. And it ends up where the entire world is of a unity of consciousness. But not just a unity of consciousness in this film. In this film, it's a hive mind, where when you enter into it, I have Bill's mind, and Bill knows everything I know. So any of us could fly planes, because we all know, we've all been through the pilot thing. So it's a hive mind, but there are 12 people who are not affected by the hive mind. Everybody else is. Everybody else is, knows what's going on, and they're all completely happy. They're all, they don't have lights on at night because there's no crime. Everybody just gets on and helps everybody else. And that's why this strapline, which I think is so good, the most miserable person on earth must save the world from happiness. Because the whole thing it sets up is, would you prefer to be miserable and egotistic and on your own? Or do you want to be part of the great happiness? All the happy people are saying, why don't you join us? Now, what's interesting about this, for me, is that within the mainstream media and, consciousness, there is a show that is fundamentally about unity of consciousness as an idea. And actually, it's setting up the question is, what's more important? Is it more important to be sort of egotistical, unhappy, and ourselves, or if everybody's happy, is that better? If you lose your egotisticalness. Now, my perspective of unity of consciousness is that it's not, we all become part of the hive mind. If you look at this from a spiritual perspective, it is not about being part of the hive mind. It is about retaining our individuality and also understanding and experiencing ourselves as being of a one with everybody else. So this is the greater conscious expressed as Nicholas. And there we have, the greater consciousness expressed as Bob or Carol or all of us are an expression of that. And Cynthia Bourgeault puts it really well. She says, Cynthia Bourgeault, she says, and by the way, just to remind you, we're talking about the second coming here. So just think, but anyway, where I'm going with this is that, I do see unity of the ideas. We did a forum earlier this year on forming a unity of consciousness. The idea of having people experience that we are all in this together. That China's problems are our problem, and our problems are China's problems, and that we should be working with each other in order to make the world work, not fighting each other about bloody boundaries or who should come into our country and who should not come into our country. These ridiculous things that people argue and fight about. The fact we spend more money on defense. If all the money spent on defense was put into a hunger project, we would be able to feed everybody on the earth. It's a completely ridiculous situation. But, if you get a point whereby people are cooperating with each other in a way to make things work, that is the idea of unity of consciousness. And the reason we don't have that is that fear. Because we're afraid of what is coming in our direction, and therefore what we want to do is to protect ourselves to make sure that we've got ours, and that our friends and our family and our community and our country can live happily, whether or not everybody else, they can do what they like. But we need to preserve it, obviously, and make that's natural. But it's not going to make things work. It's not going to solve the climate crisis. It's not going to solve the refugee problem. It's not going to solve all these problems that are coming up in the world at the moment are solvable if we were able to drop our individual determination for it to happen our way. And this is the way, going back to the egoistic thing, this is what Cynthia says. She says, the egoic selfhood does not go away. In the show Pluribus, and I do recommend you watch it, it's just interesting. In the show, in the hive mind, the egoic thing does go away. I would describe myself, if in the hive mind, yes, the woman who's the individual is called Carol. There you are, Carol. Yes, Carol. And you say, who are you? I am the individual previously known as Nicholas. That's how they describe themselves. So they are of the hive mind, so they've let go of all that stuff. But Cynthia says, and I think this is absolutely right, she says that the egoic selfhood does not go away. Rather, it becomes a good servant. It is still a very useful tool for many of the functions we're called on to perform. But it is now transcended and included. We recognize that it is a modality of action and not a seat of identity. The egoic self is a modality of action. We think it's the seat of identity. We think our country is the seat of identity. It's just not true. And the one thing that will transform that is people understanding of their place within the nature of reality. That they are part of a greater consciousness that doesn't just include humans. It includes animals, it includes bees, it includes plants, we are of one ecosystem on Earth. And we are just the bits that can call ourselves names and name everything else and then destroy it. We name everything else and we say, right, you're going to do this. And it is a function of understanding that this will be true. This will only change when people experience themselves as part of a unity of consciousness. And that is the job for education. That's really what we're supposed to be doing here. It is a function of education so that people go, so I am part of this and I'm actually an expression of this whole earth consciousness and Diane isn't a part of the earth consciousness as well. So I shouldn't be fighting Diane. I should be saying to Diane, how can I help? How can I help you make your life easier? Now, that may sound, oh, so egotistical, and sort of, we're just thinking about other people. No. It's how you make it work. It is not altruism. It is about building and allowing that greater consciousness to come through. Because who do you think knows best? The politicians or the divine order that has been here for 14.7 billion years? They are bonkers. They are as out to lunch as we are. And they are trying to solve problems from a medieval, old-fashioned, rational, and it is rational. I mean, when you work it all out, yes, we should spend this money on defense because the Russians are coming for us and the Chinese are coming for us, and therefore it's worth doing, and let's get rid of all these people who are taking our jobs and all that sort of business. It doesn't make sense when you look at the world through that whole idea of a unity of consciousness. And what has to happen is, rather than speaking to each other from our minds, we have to begin speaking to each other from our hearts. We showed the film The Heart Revolution a couple of weeks ago. Time goes, it was last week actually. And it was saying that there is many neurons in your heart as in your brain. And basically, the way that we connect on a unitive level is from our hearts, not necessarily, as Cynthia says, not just from our brains. It's a connection from the heart. And what we have to be promoting is that heart connection. And what we do then is we become part of the world becoming more conscious. We enable that development towards what the Bible calls the second coming, which is not Jesus coming down on a cloud. It is all of us recognizing that we are a part of one and that we are a part of the consciousness that created everything in the first place. And in recognizing that, we affirm it and it becomes a reality. And what happens after that, I haven't a clue. I mean, I don't know what happens when we die. I mean, I may go up to heaven and find my dad there and a pet running towards me and stuff like that, but I doubt it. I think more likely I will become part of that infinite consciousness myself, and that there's some part of me will be part of it as well. And we're moving towards that. And we are part of this whole idea of the second coming. It's not Jesus coming. I mean, in medieval times, they wanted Jesus to rescue them. It was such an awful life. But now, we realize that what we have to do is, and you don't have to do it yourself. All you have to do is to give up to that coming through your heart, because you naturally have the intelligence, the wisdom yourself. The wisdom is there within you, but your mind won't let you have it. It says, no, make sure they don't get you. Don't be fooled. Fool me once, fool me twice. Yeah. It's the heart that is going to solve this, and the heart that is going to develop this. And over this next period of time, we're going to be looking at how we do that, what it is that we do in order to enable that to happen. Thank you, Dustin. So, those who have not been here before, we always have an opportunity during our service for you to come back at me. These ideas are given with the willingness to be wrong. But if you want to either disagree or share an experience or ask a question, it's just an open mic now for anybody that wants to say anything. Yeah, Bob.
Hi, when I think of unity of consciousness, I can think of a school of fish or a flock of birds, and they're all moving at the same time. It's not like there's a leader and everybody's following. They're one consciousness. And it's like within our grasp, because it's out there in the world. If only we could find out what enzyme is making that work in the fish and the birds, that maybe we could make some progress in that area.
That's such a good point to make. And in the film The Heart Revolution that we showed, they talked about a connection between the earth and the heart, and the flocks of birds and the fish, things like that. There's something in the connection between the different aspects, the different radiation that is given out by the earth And, if you can pick it up, then, that is part of it, because obviously the earth, we're just a flower of the earth that happens to have, skin and bones. And we're just another flower, really, when it comes down to it. Thank you. Yes, that's great. Yes, Bruce.
I'd like to sort of introduce the idea of like 15,000 years ago, you're living with 50 people in nature, so nobody's lonely, nobody's touch deprived, and think of the me-we ratio. So it's not either or, it's and both. And at 13 years old, if somebody said, well, okay, you're an adolescent, what are you going to be when you grow up? It's like a stupid question. I'm part of this collective. Everything's a team effort. Maybe it's 10% me and 90% we. Fast forward today, this is hyper-individuality. What's your brand, et cetera. And the culture is so overwhelming.
Yeah.
How do we help ourselves and just the average Joe get back to some sort of, a better balance as far as, I think, obviously, when you look at, infants and so forth, you see there's a natural connection with just what's going on. But, as we grow up in this culture, there's enormous pressure to just, it's me first and always and so forth.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I do think that where we are is a progression. I think we have progressed. I think we come to this from an understanding of, Middle Ages, where everybody killing each other for every second reason and people not really be able to survive in different circumstances. I think we are in a place now where we have the potential to be able to, we're able to consider this possibility from what has come. We are standing on, the shoulders of giants, I think, and we do that. I'm not wanting to say let's go back to the Middle Ages at all. I think, I think we're moving forward. Anybody else? I'll be setting an exam next week. Yes, Diane.
So, Bruce, just along that lines, I was thinking too, the ego has run rampant, right? And that's this individualism that we have. So you said in the weeks to come, you mentioned, Nicholas, so it's education or awareness to start understanding or to reconnect with that energy or that force.
Yeah.
And so I think about, where we are as people, as we sit in silence, as we meditate, as we try to reconnect, are those the steps that you're going to talk to us about in the weeks to come, as far as how do we do this? How do we awaken? How do more people become aware?
I mean, I'm ashamed to admit I do make this up as I go along. So I've looked at next week, but not further. But I think where you're making is an interesting point. I think that there is something to think about here, which is that we are so caught up in everything that goes on, and everything is hooked into the next thing, or whether it's the next news cycle. It doesn't even work to be rational. Even spiritual rationality doesn't work, I don't think. It just becomes, spirituality becomes another consumer product. We're just consuming it. It's being nice or whatever it is, as a consumer product. My brand, my brand is I'm going to be nice now. I'm going to be spiritually nice, And you're just adding, it could be spiritually horrible, but it's just a different side of the same coin. I really think the only thing that transforms this is presence. It's the nature of presence. And, what we're looking for is people to stand up with presence and say no and yes and cut through it with that presence rather than an argument about something being right or being wrong. And standing in that experience, I think the first thing one has to do is to stand within, individually, to stand within that experience of that unity of consciousness. And when you stand within that, then you take on that presence. And you represent that presence in the world. And I think that is, I've got to stand back because Matt told me that if I stand between the things, it'll boom. And I think it is about that presence. And how that comes about, I don't know. But you see it. You see it in Dr. King. You see it in Dr. King. I mean, you don't even know what Dr. King, half the time, you didn't know what he said. You say, I have a dream. But there was a presence there. You see it in Nelson Mandela. There is a presence there that commands cooperation. And I think what we're looking for is people that command that cooperation by their presence. And people go, got it. Gandhi commanded that presence. I didn't know what Gandhi said, It's not about the words. And some point, and this is where we go to the second coming, some point that presence will become more obvious and more people will express that presence. And people go, yes, I get it. You can see it through history when people have that presence. Here I am in a church, who had that presence? Jesus had that presence. Buddha had that presence. Muhammad had that presence. That is a presence that is expressible by humanity because we've seen people express it. Buddha and Jesus, and I'm probably struck down with this, Buddha and Jesus, they're not special people. I mean, they're, one level, but they're just ordinary human beings. Jesus was not, again, I'll probably get thrown out. Jesus was not God, any much more than you are not God. He was God and you are God. Jesus was God, but all Jesus was saying is, hey guys, I can express God and you can too. And all our culture have taken it and, made the Spanish Inquisition out of it. I mean, where does that come in? And, current examples of Christianity that one could think of but wouldn't want to necessarily name. But the presence that one is talking about here is a presence that has been expressed in the history of humanity by certain people, certain individuals, that we make special. We say, oh, it's them because he's Buddha. No, he was like, whatever his name was. He was just an ordinary person. Happened to be a prince, but he was just an ordinary person. That is what we need. We need that expression that we see in Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and people like that. And it is appearing. It is appearing. Right, I'm going to go to Claire. Now, I have overrun. I'm so sorry. But we're going to go to Claire because I couldn't resist Claire saying something. And there we are, Claire.
I wonder if that expression comes through in different ways. And so there's not a particular formula of, you got to sit on your meditation cushion for 2 hours every day, or you have to say so many Hail Marys. And the examples you gave, Nicholas, were many spiritual leaders, but perhaps I'm curious if we all just connect with the power of creation that lives in, that comes through us, whether it's in our gardens or on the ski hill or through art or some expression, and we feel that feeling inside of ourselves, that's how we tune into that consciousness, that greater consciousness. And so you got to find your own thing, right?
I totally agree. It could be art, it could be sport, it could be gardening, it could be sewing, it could be whatever, it could be tennis. You see tennis players in that zone. They're just not there. It could be anything. And unfortunately, I work in this industry. so I tend to draw. If I was a sports player, I'd probably be doing sport. But you're quite right. Everybody will have their own particular expression of this and expressed in their own particular ways. And God forbid it's all about spirituality and religion and stuff like that. It's been half of the problems of the world. So, let's have it in that way as well. Thank you. I'm glad I took that.